The blood on her dress had long since dried to rust-colored stains, but Martha Norwood knew no amount of scrubbing would wash away the shame her father had painted across her entire existence. She stood at the edge of Casa Grande, Arizona, her 6-month-old daughter wrapped in a faded quilt against her chest, watching the town she had called home disappear into the dusty horizon behind her, as the preacher's words still rang in her ears like a death knell. No fallen woman shall corrupt the souls of decent folk. It was the summer of 1882, and the desert heat pressed down on Martha like judgment itself, relentless and unforgiving. Her feet ached in boots that had seen better days, and the small bundle of possessions she carried felt heavier with each step away from everything she had ever known. The baby, little Sarah, whimpered against her chest, hungry again though Martha had nursed her less than an hour ago. There was not enough milk anymore. There had not been enough food for weeks, not since her father had discovered her condition and turned her out of the only home she had ever known. Martha had been 19 when Thomas Caldwell had come to town, a smooth, talking salesman with promises sweeter than honey and lies smoother than silk. He had courted her properly, or so she thought, speaking of marriage and a future together. Her father, a stern blacksmith who ruled his household with an iron fist as unyielding as the metal he worked, had disapproved from the start. Martha had not listened. She had been so certain that Thomas loved her, so sure that when she gave herself to him in the hayloft of the livery stable that warm spring night, it was the beginning of their life together. Thomas had left town 3 days later. She had not known about the wife and 3 children waiting for him in Tucson until it was far too late. By the time Martha realized she was with child, autumn had arrived with its cooler temperatures and the first whispers of scandal. She had tried to hide it, binding herself tight beneath loose dresses, but in a town of 300 souls, secrets had a way of crawling into the light. Her father had confronted her on a cold November morning, and the fury in his eyes had been more terrifying than any desert rattlesnake. He had given her until Sarah was born and not a day longer. "You have brought dishonor upon this family," he had said, his voice like gravel. "I will not have a bastard grandchild under my roof. I will not have my name dragged through the mud by your sins." Her mother had wept but said nothing. Her 2 younger brothers had looked away. And when Sarah had come into the world on a freezing January night, red-faced and wailing with the strength of life itself, Martha had felt both overwhelming love and crushing despair. 6 months later, true to his word, her father had cast her out. The preacher had given the final blessing to her exile, standing before the congregation on that scorching Sunday morning, and declaring that Martha Norwood was no longer welcome among God-fearing Christians. Some of the women had cried. Most had turned away. Not a single person had spoken in her defense. Now, walking along the rutted road that led north from Casa Grande toward whatever fate awaited her, Martha tried not to think about the future. 1 foot in front of the other. That was all she could manage. 1 step, then another, while the sun climbed higher and the desert stretched endlessly in all directions, dotted with saguaro cacti that stood like silent witnesses to her desperation. She had perhaps $3 to her name, a few pieces of clothing, and a burning determination to keep her daughter alive. It would have to be enough. The sound of hoofbeats behind her made Martha's heart lurch with fear. She moved to the side of the road, keeping her eyes down as she had been taught, making herself small and insignificant. Perhaps whoever it was would simply ride past. Perhaps they would not recognize her. Perhaps Miss Norwood. The voice was deep and unfamiliar, tinged with an accent she could not quite place. Martha looked up slowly, shading her eyes against the brutal sun, and found herself staring at a man on horseback. He was tall. Even sitting down she could tell that, with broad shoulders and sun-darkened skin that spoke of years working under the Arizona sky. He wore dusty brown trousers, a faded blue shirt, and a hat that had seen better days. His face was weathered but not unkind, with lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled more often than he frowned. Those eyes, a startling gray-green like sagebrush after rain, regarded her with something that looked almost like concern. "I don't believe we have met, sir," Martha said carefully, adjusting her hold on Sarah. The baby had fallen asleep, mercifully, her tiny face peaceful against Martha's shoulder. "Name's Grant Keller," the man said, touching the brim of his hat in a gesture of respect that Martha had not experienced in months. "I work the cattle ranch about 10 miles north of here. Heard about what happened in town this morning. Thought you might need some help." Martha's pride flared hot and defensive. "I can manage on my own, Mr. Keller. Thank you for your concern." Grant Keller studied her for a long moment, and Martha felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the sun. She was acutely aware of how she must look. Dress stained and worn, hair falling out of its pins, face streaked with dust and dried tears. She lifted her chin anyway, meeting his gaze with what she hoped was dignity. "I expect you can manage," Grant said slowly. "But I also expect that managing does not mean the same thing as surviving. Next town is 30 miles up this road, and there is not a drop of water or shade between here and there. You are carrying a baby. You have been walking for near 2 hours already in heat that could kill a grown man." "Then what do you suggest?" Martha asked, hating the tremor in her voice. "I have been cast out, Mr. Keller. I have nowhere to go and no one who will take me in. Unless you are offering charity, I fail to see how your concern helps my situation." "Not offering charity," Grant said. "Offering work. My ranch needs a cook and housekeeper. Previous woman who did the job took sick and moved back east to live with her sister. Been making do with my own cooking for near 3 months now, and I can tell you honestly, it is barely fit for the dogs." Martha stared at him. "You want to hire me, knowing what you know." "I know you need work and I need help," Grant said practically. "I know you are willing to walk 30 miles through desert heat to give your daughter a chance at life. That tells me you have backbone and determination. Far as I am concerned, that is what matters." "I have a child," Martha said, as if he might have somehow missed Sarah bundled against her chest. "A baby who cries and needs tending. I cannot promise to be available every moment of the day." "Babies do tend to need attention," Grant agreed, and was that amusement in his voice. "I am not expecting you to work miracles, Miss Norwood. I am expecting 3 meals a day that do not taste like boot leather and maybe some clean clothes now and again. You can keep the baby with you while you work. There is a good-sized house with a spare room that has been sitting empty. It is yours if you want it. It was too good to be true. It had to be." Men did not simply ride up and offer desperate women jobs and safe places to live without expecting something in return. Martha had learned that lesson the hard way with Thomas Caldwell, and she would not be fooled twice. "What exactly are you expecting from me, Mr. Keller?" she asked bluntly. "Let us be clear about terms." Grant's face shifted, and Martha realized with surprise that he looked offended. "I am expecting honest work for honest pay, Miss Norwood. Nothing more and nothing less. You will have your own room with a lock on the door. Your wages will be $12 a month plus room and board. You will cook and clean and do laundry. I will treat you with respect and expect the same in return. If those terms are not acceptable, I will ride on and leave you to your walking. But I will not sit here and pretend I do not see a woman and baby in desperate need when I have the means to help." The sincerity in his voice made Martha's throat tighten with unexpected emotion. She wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to believe that there was still kindness in the world, that not every man was like Thomas Caldwell, that she and Sarah might have a chance at something better than dying by the side of a desert road. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you help me when your own town just cast me out?" Grant was quiet for a moment, his gaze drifting to the horizon. "My mother was in a similar situation once," he said finally, "before she met my stepfather. She was alone and desperate with a baby that was not her husband's, after her first husband died, and she was taken advantage of by a man she thought was a friend. She nearly did not survive. Someone helped her when no one else would. I figure maybe I can do the same for someone else in need." The story was raw and honest, and Martha felt something crack open in her chest. She looked down at Sarah, at her daughter's perfect tiny face, and thought about what the next 30 miles would bring. More heat, more hunger, more uncertainty. And at the end of it, likely more rejection, because the world was not kind to women in her position. $12 a month and room and board, she repeated. And respect, Grant added. That is part of the bargain, too. Martha took a deep breath, tasting dust and hope in equal measure. "Then I accept your offer, Mr. Keller, and I thank you for it." Grant dismounted in one fluid motion and walked over to the small bundle of possessions Martha had dropped by the side of the road. He picked it up easily, tying it to his saddle, then turned back to her. "Climb up. It is too hot for you to walk another 10 miles, and your daughter needs to be out of this sun." Martha had not ridden a horse since she was a child, and never while holding a baby. Grant must have seen the hesitation in her face because he stepped forward and said, "I will hand her up to you once you are settled. She will be safe." It took some awkward maneuvering, made more difficult by Martha's long skirts and exhaustion, but finally, she was seated in the saddle with Sarah carefully secured in her arms. Grant swung up behind her, his arms coming around on either side to take the reins, and Martha felt her face flush at the proximity. It was entirely improper. It was also entirely necessary. "Hold on," Grant said, his voice close to her ear. "We will take it slow and easy." True to his word, he kept the horse to a gentle walk, navigating the desert road with practiced ease. Martha felt herself relax incrementally as the minutes passed, and Casa Grande disappeared behind them. The nightmare of this morning, the preacher's condemning voice, the stares of people she had known her entire life, all of it began to feel distant, like something that had happened to someone else. "Tell me about your ranch," she said, needing to fill the silence with something other than her own churning thoughts. "About 2,000 acres, Grant said. "Not the biggest operation in Arizona, but it is mine free and clear. I run about 300 head of cattle, mostly longhorns with a few crosses I am trying out. Got 2 hands who work for me, good men both. Mexican fellows, brothers named Carlos and Miguel Vasquez. They have a small house on the property, keep to themselves mostly. There are chickens for eggs, a milk cow vegetable garden that is struggling but still producing. The house itself is adobe, thick walls that keep it cool in summer and warm in winter. 3 bedrooms, main living area, decent-sized kitchen. Built it myself 5 years back when I bought the land." "You built it yourself?" Martha asked, impressed despite herself. "Most of it," Grant confirmed. "Had help with the heavy work, but I did the planning and most of the construction. Figured if I was going to own land, I should know how to take care of it properly. My stepfather taught me that. He was a builder back in Texas before he moved the family out to Arizona Territory." "Is your family still in the area?" Martha asked. "Mother and stepfather passed about 3 years back," Grant said, and there was old grief in his voice. "Fever took them both within a week of each other. I have a half-sister in Tucson, married with kids of her own. We write when we can, but it has been near a year since I have seen her in person." "I am sorry for your loss," Martha said softly. "Life in the territory is hard," Grant said matter-of-factly. "You learn to treasure what you have while you have it and keep moving when it is gone. Not much else you can do." They rode in silence for a while, and Martha found herself noticing small things. The way Grant held the reins with confident hands, the steady rhythm of the horse's gait, the vast sweep of the desert landscape with its strange, stark beauty. Saguaro cacti stood like sentinels against the bright blue sky, some of them 20 feet tall or more. In the distance, mountains rose purple and hazy with heat. A hawk circled overhead, riding the thermal currents with outstretched wings. It was so different from the crowded, judgmental confines of Casa Grande. Out here, there was space to breathe, space to be something other than the fallen woman everyone had decided she was. "What made you come into town today?" Martha asked. "It cannot have been just to rescue me." "Needed supplies," Grant said. "Flour, sugar, coffee, few other things. Heard the commotion at the church when I was loading up at the general store. Asked what was happening, and the clerk told me the whole story, all pleased with himself like it was great entertainment. Made my blood boil, if I am being honest. I have seen a lot of cruelty in my life, Miss Norwood, but there is something particularly ugly about people using God as an excuse to kick someone when they are down." The vehemence in his voice surprised Martha. "You sound like you have personal experience with that." "Some," Grant admitted. "My real father was not a good man, used his fists more than his words, and always claimed it was righteous discipline. My mother finally took me and left when I was about 8 years old. The preacher in that town told her she was breaking her marriage vows, that she was condemned to hell for leaving her husband. She told him she would take her chances with hell over one more day with that man. Best decision she ever made." "She sounds like she was strong," Martha said. "She was," Grant agreed, "and stubborn as a mule. You remind me of her a little, if you do not mind me saying, that same kind of steel underneath." Martha was not sure how to respond to that, so she said nothing. Sarah stirred in her arms, making small, fussing sounds, and Martha shifted her carefully. "She will be hungry soon. I should probably warn you that babies are not quiet creatures." "I have been around babies before," Grant said with what sounded like amusement. "My half-sister has 4 of them. I expect I will survive a little crying." They crested a small rise, and suddenly the landscape opened up before them. In a shallow valley between low hills, Martha could see buildings. A good-sized adobe house just as Grant had described, along with a barn, several smaller outbuildings, and corrals where cattle grazed in the shade of cottonwood trees. There was green here, actual green, which meant water. Martha felt something ease in her chest at the sight. "Welcome to the Keller Ranch," Grant said. "It is not much, but it is home." To Martha, who had thought just hours ago that she might die by the side of the road with her daughter in her arms, it looked like paradise. Grant helped her down from the horse with careful hands, making sure she had her balance before releasing her. Sarah was awake now and beginning to fuss in earnest, her tiny face scrunching up in preparation for a full-blown wail. Martha jiggled her automatically, the soothing motion something she had learned through 6 months of trial and error. "Let me show you the house," Grant said, untying Martha's bundle from the saddle. "You can get settled, tend to the baby, maybe rest a bit before you worry about anything else." "I am not expecting you to start work today." "I do not mind working," Martha said quickly. "You have been generous enough already. I should earn my keep." Grant gave her a look that was both amused and exasperated. "Miss Norwood, you have been cast out of your home, walked for miles in the desert heat, and you are caring for an infant. You are allowed to rest for a few hours without it reflecting poorly on your character. Besides, if you are going to cook, you need to know where things are in the kitchen. That is not something you can figure out while exhausted. He had a point, though Martha's pride chafed at accepting more kindness than she felt she deserved. Still, Sarah's cries were growing more insistent, and Martha knew she needed privacy to nurse her. Very well. But I will start earning my wages tomorrow, Mr. Keller. That is not negotiable. Tomorrow it is, Grant agreed. He led her to the house, pushing open the heavy wooden door to reveal a surprisingly spacious interior. The thick adobe walls did indeed keep the space cool, a blessed relief after hours in the sun. The main room had a large fireplace, several sturdy pieces of furniture that looked handmade, and windows covered with simple cotton curtains. Everything was clean but masculine, functional rather than decorative. "Kitchen is through there," Grant said, pointing to a doorway. "Your room is down this hall. It is the first door on the right. My room is at the end of the hall, and there is a spare room in between that is mostly storage right now. Washroom is out back, and there is a pump by the kitchen for water." He opened the door to what was now Martha's room, and she found herself in a simple but comfortable space with a real bed, a dresser, a small table and chair by the window, and a trunk for storage. The window looked out over the valley, offering a view of the mountains in the distance. It was more than she had dared to hope for. "I will leave you to get settled," Grant said, setting her bundle on the bed. "There are clean linens in the trunk if you need them. Take your time." "Mr. Keller," Martha said as he turned to leave. He paused in the doorway, looking back at her. "Thank you, truly. I do not know how to express what this means to me." "You do not need to express anything," Grant said quietly. "Just take care of yourself and your daughter, that is thanks enough." He closed the door gently behind him, leaving Martha alone in her new room with Sarah crying lustily in her arms. She sat down on the edge of the bed, which was more comfortable than anything she had slept on in months, and began to nurse her daughter. Sarah latched on eagerly, her cries subsiding into contented suckling sounds. Martha looked around the room, at the solid walls and the window with its view of mountains and sky, and felt tears slip down her cheeks. They were not tears of sadness, though there was grief mixed in them for everything she had lost. Mostly they were tears of relief. She and Sarah had a roof over their heads. They had food and safety and the promise of honest work. They had been given a chance. She would not waste it. The next morning, Martha woke before dawn to Sarah's hungry cries and dressed quickly in the half-light. She had slept better than she had in months, despite the strangeness of the new place. Sarah nursed eagerly, and Martha changed her into clean clothes from their meager supply, then wrapped her securely in the quilt. The house was quiet, but Martha could see lamplight coming from under the door, suggesting someone else was already awake. She ventured out into the main room and found Grant stoking the fire in the kitchen stove, his movements efficient and practiced. He looked up when she entered, offering a brief nod of greeting. "Morning, Miss Norwood. How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in a long time," Martha admitted. "Thank you, and please call me Martha. Miss Norwood sounds far too formal for someone you are employing." "Martha it is, then," Grant said. "And you should call me Grant. Mr. Keller is what people called my stepfather. Coffee should be ready in a few minutes if you want some." "Let me make breakfast," Martha said, settling Sarah into a wooden crate she had lined with soft blankets to serve as a makeshift cradle. "That is why you hired me, after all. Where do you keep the eggs?" Grant showed her around the kitchen, pointing out where he stored various supplies. The space was well organized if a bit Spartan, with everything needed for basic cooking, but none of the small comforts or decorations Martha associated with a woman's touch. She found flour and salt and lard, eggs from the henhouse Grant brought in, strips of bacon hanging in the cool cellar. Within 30 minutes, she had biscuits in the oven and bacon sizzling in a cast-iron skillet, along with scrambled eggs cooked with a bit of cheese she found wrapped in cheesecloth. Grant sat at the table, watching her work with an expression she could not quite read. When she set a plate in front of him, piled high with hot food, he looked at it like she had performed a miracle. "I told you my cooking was bad," he said, picking up his fork. "But I do not think I adequately explained just how bad. This smells like heaven." Martha felt a small flush of pride as she fixed her own plate and sat down across from him. The food was simple, nothing fancy, but it was hot and plentiful. She had not realized how hungry she was until she started eating, and she had to consciously slow down to avoid making herself sick. "Tell me about the routine around here," she said between bites. "What time do you usually eat? What kind of work are you doing during the day? I need to know how to plan meals and chores." Grant outlined his typical schedule. Up before dawn, out working the cattle and handling various ranch tasks until midday, back for lunch, more work in the afternoon, usually done by early evening unless there was something urgent. Carlos and Miguel had a similar schedule, but usually brought their own lunch out to wherever they were working on the property. "They will be surprised to see you here," Grant said. "But they are good men. They will not cause you any trouble or make you feel uncomfortable. I will make sure they understand you are to be treated with respect." "I appreciate that," Martha said softly. She paused, then added, "I need to be honest with you, Grant. I do not know how long the supplies I have for Sarah will last. She is starting to eat a bit of mashed food now, but she still nurses several times a day. I am worried about what happens when my milk is not enough anymore." "We will figure it out," Grant said practically. "Milk cow gives plenty and we can get goat milk if needed. Babies are resilient." "She will be fine." His matter-of-fact confidence was reassuring. Martha finished her breakfast and began cleaning up, washing dishes in the basin while Sarah cooed happily in her makeshift cradle. Grant watched for a moment, then stood and grabbed his hat from the peg by the door. "I will be out checking the fence line in the north pasture today. Should be back around noon for lunch. If you need anything, Carlos and Miguel are usually working somewhere close to the barn. They both speak English, though Miguel is still learning." "I will manage," Martha said. "Go on." "I have plenty to keep me busy here." After Grant left, Martha spent the morning exploring the house more thoroughly and beginning the work of making it cleaner and more organized. There was laundry piled in one corner that clearly had not been touched in weeks, so she hauled water from the pump and set up the washing in large tubs outside where the sun could help with the drying. Sarah watched from a blanket in the shade, playing with her toes and babbling to herself in that way babies had. Around mid-morning, a man appeared leading a horse toward the barn. He was shorter than Grant, lean and weathered, with dark hair and the bronzed skin of someone who spent his life outdoors. He noticed Martha and changed direction, approaching with cautious curiosity. "Buenos dias," he said, touching his hat politely. "I am Carlos Vasquez." "You must be the new housekeeper Grant mentioned this morning." "Martha Norwood," she said, offering a smile. "It is nice to meet you, Mr. Vasquez." "Just Carlos, please," he said. His English was accented but clear. "My brother Miguel and we are glad Grant finally hired someone." His cooking it was. He made a face that needed no translation. Martha laughed despite herself. "So I have heard. I promise to do better." "I am sure you will," Carlos said warmly. Then his gaze fell on Sarah and his expression softened. "Your daughter?" "Yes, her name is Sarah." "She is beautiful," Carlos said simply. "Children are a blessing, no. Miguel and we both have families back in Mexico. We miss them, but the work here is good and Grant pays fair wages. Someday we will bring them all to Arizona." There was no judgment in his voice, no condemnation for the fact that Martha had a child but no husband, just simple acceptance. Martha felt her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. "I am sure your families miss you very much," she said. But we write when we can and we send money home." "It is for them that we work." Carlos glanced toward the barn. "I should get back to work. Miguel and I are fixing the roof on the east barn today. If you need anything, just call out. We will hear you." "Thank you, Carlos," Martha said. He tipped his hat again and headed off, leaving Martha with the distinct impression that she had just made an ally. It was a good feeling, one she had not experienced in far too long. By noon, she had lunch ready. Sandwiches with cold beef and fresh bread she had baked that morning, along with sliced vegetables from the garden and cool water from the well. Grant appeared right on time, dusty and sweat-stained, and washed up at the pump before coming inside. "Smells good," he said, settling into his chair. "You have been busy this morning. I saw the laundry line full." "Just catching up on what needs doing," Martha said, serving him a plate. "The house is in good condition overall. You keep things tidy." "I try," Grant said. "But there is a difference between tidy and clean. I suspect you will find plenty that needs a woman's attention." They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Sarah was asleep in her cradle, worn out from a morning of fresh air and sunshine. Martha found herself studying Grant when he was not looking. The strong line of his jaw, the way his hands moved with unconscious grace, the quiet competence he brought to everything he did. He was handsome in a rough-hewn way, she realized, though it was the kindness in his eyes that truly caught her attention. "I met Carlos this morning," she said. "He seems nice." "He is," Grant agreed. "Both he and Miguel are hard workers. I am lucky to have them. Finding good help out here is not always easy." "They mentioned they have families in Mexico. Is that difficult for them?" "Being so far away, I imagine it is," Grant said. "But they are saving money to eventually bring everyone up here. Miguel's wife just had a baby, according to his last letter. A son. He is hoping to have enough saved by next year to bring them all to Arizona." "That must be hard, not being there for the birth of his child," Martha said softly. "Life requires hard choices sometimes," Grant said, his gray-green eyes meeting hers. "But we do what we must to take care of the people we love. That is what matters in the end." There was something in his tone that made Martha wonder if he was talking about more than just Carlos and Miguel, but she did not press. Instead, she asked about the ranch work, learning about cattle breeds and grazing patterns and water rights, topics she had never considered before but found surprisingly interesting the way Grant explained them. After lunch, Grant returned to his work, and Martha spent the afternoon cleaning the house more thoroughly and preparing dinner. She made a pot roast with vegetables, letting it simmer slowly on the stove while she tackled other chores. The kitchen window gave her a view of the yard, and she found herself pausing occasionally to watch Grant work with the horses in the corral, his movements sure and gentle as he handled the animals. Dinner that evening was a quieter affair. Grant praised the food enthusiastically, and Martha felt a warm glow of satisfaction at being able to do her job well. After the meal, she cleaned up while Grant sat by the fireplace, reading a month-old newspaper he had brought back from town. Sarah was fussy, sensing perhaps the change in routine, and Martha walked her back and forth across the main room, patting her back and humming softly. "You can bring her out here if it helps," Grant said, looking up from his paper. "I do not mind the noise." "Are you sure?" Martha asked. "She can be quite loud when she is in a mood." "I am sure," Grant said. Besides, it is nice having life in the house again. It has been too quiet here for too long." So Martha settled into the chair across from him, rocking Sarah gently. The baby eventually calmed, sucking on her fist and staring wide-eyed at the flickering firelight. It was a peaceful scene, domestic and comfortable in a way Martha had never experienced with her own family. Her father had never allowed noise or disruption in the evening. Her mother had been a silent shadow, always deferring to her husband's wishes. This was different. This felt like home. "May I ask you something?" Martha said after a while. "Of course," Grant replied, setting aside his paper. "Why did you really offer me this job?" "I know you said your mother was in a similar situation, but that cannot be the whole reason. You do not know me. You have no idea if I am actually a good person or if I will do good work. For all you know, I could be trouble." Grant considered this for a long moment, his gaze thoughtful. "I suppose I saw someone who needed help and figured I could provide it. Not much more complicated than that. As for whether you are a good person, well, I have found that people who have been knocked down by life tend to be either bitter or compassionate. You walked into the desert heat to save your daughter with nothing but determination and hope. That tells me you are the compassionate type. The rest we can figure out as we go." "And if I fail?" Martha asked quietly. "If I cannot do the job well enough or if Sarah is too much disruption?" "Then we will deal with it when it happens," Grant said simply. "But I do not think you are going to fail, Martha. I think you are going to surprise yourself with how strong you are." The conviction in his voice made Martha's eyes sting with tears. She blinked them back, focusing on Sarah's sweet face. "I hope you are right. Time will tell," Grant said, "but I have a good feeling about this." The days began to fall into a rhythm after that. Martha woke early, made breakfast, tended to Sarah while doing housework and laundry and all the 100 small tasks that kept a household running. She cooked hearty meals that Grant and the two ranch hands devoured with gratifying enthusiasm. She swept and scrubbed and organized, gradually transforming the house from a bachelor's functional space into something warmer and more welcoming. Grant was true to his word about treating her with respect. He never made her feel uncomfortable or suggested she owed him anything beyond honest work. He was unfailingly polite, helpful without being condescending, and genuinely interested in Sarah's well-being. He brought home a proper cradle from Casa Grande one day, saying he had seen it at the general store and thought it would be better for the baby than the makeshift box Martha had been using. Another time, he returned with fabric for curtains, claiming the old ones were falling apart anyway, and she might as well make new ones to her taste. Small kindnesses, but they added up to something larger. Martha found herself relaxing in ways she had not realized she had been tense. She laughed more easily. She slept better. She began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she and Sarah had found a place where they could truly belong. Carlos and Miguel became familiar presences as well. They were respectful and kind, occasionally bringing Martha fresh fish from the creek or wildflowers they had found while working. Miguel, whose English was still rough, made an effort to teach Martha a few Spanish phrases, and she in turn taught him some cooking techniques his wife had described in her letters. It was a small community, but it felt genuine in a way Casa Grande never had. About 3 weeks after Martha arrived at the ranch, Grant came home one evening with news. "I need to take some cattle to market in Tucson next week. It will be a 4-day trip, maybe 5. Carlos and Miguel will go with me. I wanted to ask if you would be comfortable staying here alone with Sarah while we are gone. You will have the house to yourself, and there is plenty of food stored. But if you would rather, I can see about having someone come stay with you, maybe Miguel's cousin who lives closer to town." Martha considered this carefully. The thought of being alone was both daunting and oddly appealing. "I think we will manage on our own. Sarah and I are both getting stronger, and honestly, it might be nice to have some time to ourselves. I can use the chance to do some deep cleaning that is hard to manage with people coming and going." "You are sure?" Grant asked, and there was genuine concern in his expression. "I do not like the idea of leaving you unprotected." "I can handle a rifle if I need to," Martha said. "My father taught me when I was young back before." She trailed off, not wanting to finish that thought. "There is a Winchester in the cabinet by the door," Grant said. "Ammunition is in the drawer beneath it. I will show you how to load it before I leave, just in case. Though I do not expect you will need it. We do not get much trouble out here." "I appreciate the precaution," Martha said. "When do you leave?" "Monday morning early. We should be back by Friday evening, Saturday at the latest." The days before Grant left passed quickly. Martha found herself feeling strangely anxious about his departure, which was foolish. She had known this man for less than a month. He was her employer, nothing more. The fact that she had grown accustomed to his steady presence, to the sound of his voice and the comfort of knowing he was nearby, that meant nothing. It could not mean anything. But when Monday morning came and Grant stood by his packed horse, checking the saddle straps one last time, Martha felt her chest tighten with something that felt uncomfortably like worry. "You have everything you need?" Grant asked, going through the list again. "Food, water, firewood, ammunition." "Everything," Martha assured him. "We will be fine, Grant. You focus on getting a good price for your cattle and coming home safe." Something flickered in Grant's eyes at the word home, but he just nodded. "I will be back as soon as I can. If anything happens, anything at all, you can fire 3 shots in the air. The neighbors to the west, the Hendersons, they are about 5 miles off, but they will hear it and come check on you." "Nothing is going to happen," Martha said firmly. "Now go on. The day is wasting." Grant mounted his horse, then looked down at her with an expression that made her heart skip. "Take care of yourself, Martha, and take care of that little girl." "Always," Martha said. She stood in the yard with Sarah in her arms, watching Grant ride off with Carlos and Miguel trailing behind with the cattle. They grew smaller and smaller against the vast landscape, until finally they disappeared over a rise, and Martha was truly alone for the first time since arriving at the ranch. She spent that first day keeping busy, throwing herself into work to avoid thinking too much. She baked bread and washed floors and reorganized the pantry. Sarah was clingy, perhaps sensing the change in routine, and Martha kept her close, talking to her constantly as she worked. But that night, when the sun set and the house grew dark except for the lamplight, Martha felt the weight of solitude press down on her. Every creak and groan of the settling house made her jump. Every distant sound from the desert beyond made her heart race. She checked the locks on the doors 3 times before finally going to bed, and even then she slept fitfully, waking at every small noise. The second day was easier. Martha woke to brilliant sunshine and Sarah's cheerful babbling, and the fears of the night seemed silly in the bright morning light. She took the baby outside, letting her play on a blanket in the shade while Martha tended the garden and fed the chickens. The physical work was soothing, and by midday, Martha felt more like herself again. She spent the afternoon doing mending, sitting by the window with Sarah dozing in the cradle beside her. It was peaceful in a way she had not expected. For months, her life had been nothing but stress and fear and judgment. Here, alone in this house with her daughter, she could simply be. No one was watching her. No one was whispering behind their hands about her shame. She was just Martha, mother to Sarah, doing the work she needed to do to survive. That night, she slept better. The third day brought unexpected excitement when a rider appeared on the horizon around noon. Martha's heart leapt into her throat, and she grabbed the rifle from its cabinet, making sure it was loaded as Grant had shown her. She stood on the porch with the rifle held low but ready, watching the rider approach with wary eyes. As the figure grew closer, Martha realized it was a woman. She was riding astride like a man, wearing split skirts and a wide-brimmed hat, and she moved with the easy confidence of someone completely comfortable on horseback. She pulled up a respectful distance from the house and called out, "Hello, are you Martha Norwood?" "I am," Martha said cautiously. "Who are you?" "Sarah Henderson," the woman said, dismounting with fluid grace. "My husband and I own the ranch to the west. Grant asked us to check on you while he was away, make sure you had everything you needed. I brought some fresh eggs and a few other things that might be useful." Martha lowered the rifle, relief washing through her. "That was kind of you, Mrs. Henderson. Please come in." Sarah Henderson was perhaps 35, with sun-streaked brown hair and a face that had seen its share of hard work and laughter. She had a warm smile and sharp, intelligent eyes that took in everything about Martha in one swift glance. If she had any judgmental thoughts about Martha's situation, she kept them to herself. "Call me Sarah. Mrs. Henderson makes me feel ancient." She handed over a basket filled with eggs, a jar of honey, and what looked like fresh butter wrapped in cloth. "I would have come sooner, but we have been dealing with a sick horse and I could not get away." "I am grateful you came at all," Martha said, leading her inside. "Would you like some coffee? I just made a fresh pot." "I would love some," Sarah said, settling into a chair at the kitchen table. Her gaze fell on baby Sarah in her cradle and her face softened. "Oh, what a sweetheart. How old is she?" "6 months, Martha said, pouring coffee for them both. "May I?" Sarah asked, gesturing toward the baby. "Of course," Martha said. Sarah picked up little Sarah with the practiced ease of someone who had spent time around infants, cooing at her and making her giggle. "She is beautiful. You are blessed." The easy acceptance, the lack of judgment, made Martha's defenses crumble slightly. Most people do not see it that way. Sarah looked up, her expression suddenly fierce. "Most people are fools. A child is a blessing no matter the circumstances of her birth. Anyone who says otherwise has never truly understood what matters in life." "Thank you for saying that," Martha said softly. "I am not just saying it, I mean it." Sarah bounced the baby gently. "Grant told us a bit about your situation when he stopped by before heading to Tucson. He was worried about leaving you alone, asked us to keep an eye out. My husband and I, we do not hold with the kind of treatment you received in Casa Grande. It is cruel and unchristian, no matter what the preacher says." "You are kind to say so," Martha said. "I have been fortunate to find work here. Grant has been incredibly generous." Sarah gave her a knowing look. "Grant is a good man, one of the best I have known. He has been alone too long, if you ask me. This ranch needs a woman's touch, and he needs someone who can see past the rough exterior to the decent man underneath." Martha felt her cheeks warm. "He is my employer, Mrs. Henderson, Sarah, nothing more than that." "For now, perhaps," Sarah said cryptically. "But time has a way of changing things. You never know what might develop." They spent a pleasant hour talking, and Martha found herself relaxing in Sarah Henderson's company. The older woman had a straightforward manner and a sharp wit that Martha appreciated. She shared stories about her own life, how she had come to Arizona Territory with her husband 20 years ago, the struggles they had faced, the life they had built together. It was inspiring and daunting in equal measure. When Sarah finally left, promising to visit again soon, Martha felt lighter than she had in days. She was not completely alone out here. There were good people willing to help, willing to see her as a person rather than just a scandal. It was more than she had dared to hope for. The fourth and fifth days passed quietly. Martha continued her work, finding satisfaction in the simple routines of cooking and cleaning and caring for Sarah. She slept well, no longer jumping at every sound. The ranch began to feel less like a temporary refuge and more like a place where she might actually build a life. Friday evening arrived, and Martha found herself listening for the sound of returning horses. She prepared a large dinner, making sure there was plenty for 3 hungry men who had been on the trail for days. As the sun began to set, painting the desert in shades of gold and purple, she heard them, hoofbeats and the low murmur of voices carrying across the open land. Martha stepped out onto the porch with Sarah in her arms, watching as Grant and the Vasquez brothers drove the horses into the corral. Grant looked tired and dusty, his face shadowed with several days' worth of beard, but when he saw her standing there, his face broke into a smile that made her heart do strange things in her chest. "Welcome home," she called out, and realized as she said it that she meant it completely. This was home now for both her and Sarah. Grant handed his horse off to Carlos and walked toward the house with long, purposeful strides. "It is good to be back. How did everything go while we were gone?" "Smoothly," Martha assured him. "No problems at all. Sarah Henderson stopped by to check on us, which was kind of her. Dinner is ready whenever you are hungry." "Give me 15 minutes to wash up and I will be there," Grant said. Then, hesitantly, he reached out and gently touched Sarah's tiny hand. The baby grabbed his finger with surprising strength, and Grant's smile widened. "She has grown while I was gone." "Babies do that," Martha said, trying to ignore the way her pulse quickened at his nearness. "They grow when you are not looking." "I suppose they do," Grant said softly. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, something hung in the air between them, something unspoken but palpable. Then he stepped back, clearing his throat. "I will go get cleaned up. Thank you for holding down the fort, Martha." "That is what you pay me for," Martha said, keeping her voice light. But as she watched him walk away, she knew that what was developing between them had very little to do with employment, and everything to do with something far more complicated and potentially wonderful. Dinner that night was lively, with Carlos and Miguel joining them and everyone sharing stories from the trip to Tucson. The cattle had brought a good price, Grant reported, which meant the ranch was in solid financial shape for the coming year. They had encountered no trouble on the road, though the heat had been brutal, and they had been grateful for every water source they passed. "Did you miss us?" Carlos asked Martha with a teasing grin. "I missed having someone to cook for," Martha said diplomatically. "It is not very satisfying making meals for just myself and a baby who only drinks milk." "We missed your cooking," Miguel said in his careful English. "Trail food is very bad." "I can imagine," Martha said, serving them generous portions of beef stew and fresh bread. "Eat up. There is plenty." After dinner, Carlos and Miguel headed back to their own house, leaving Grant and Martha alone. She cleaned up the kitchen while he sat at the table, watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "I really did miss this," Grant said finally. "Coming home to a warm house and good food. Having someone to talk to. I did not realize how lonely I had gotten until it was not lonely anymore." Martha's hand stilled in the washing basin. "I am glad I could help with that." "It is more than just help, Martha," Grant said quietly. "You have made this place feel like a home again. I want you to know how much I appreciate that." There was something in his voice that made Martha turn to face him fully. In the lamplight, his features were softer than usual, and the expression in his eyes was almost vulnerable. "You gave me a chance when no one else would," she said. "I am the one who is grateful, Grant. You saved my life and Sarah's. I will never forget that." "I did not do it expecting gratitude," Grant said. I did it because it was the right thing to do, and because—" He trailed off, seeming to reconsider his words. "Because," Martha prompted gently. Grant stood, crossing the small space between them, until he was close enough that Martha could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Because from the moment I saw you standing by that road, holding your daughter and facing down the world with nothing but determination, I knew you were someone special, someone worth knowing, someone who deserved better than what life had dealt you." Martha's breath caught in her throat. "Grant." "I am not asking for anything," Grant said quickly. "I just wanted you to know. You are not just my housekeeper, Martha. You are becoming important to me, more important than I probably should admit." The honesty in his words pierced through all of Martha's careful defenses. For weeks, she had been telling herself that what she felt for Grant was simple gratitude, that the way her heart lifted when she heard his voice or saw his smile was just appreciation for his kindness. But standing here now, with him looking at her like she was something precious, she could not lie to herself anymore. "You are important to me too," she whispered. "More than I expected, more than I probably should feel." "Why should not you feel it?" Grant asked, reaching up to gently brush a strand of hair from her face. "We are both adults. We are both free to feel whatever we feel. There is no shame in that." "People would judge," Martha said. "They already think the worst of me. If they knew I had feelings for you, for my employer, living under the same roof." "Let them judge," Grant said fiercely. "I learned a long time ago that you cannot live your life based on what other people think. You have to do what is right for you, what makes you happy. And Martha, you make me happier than I have been in years. Just having you here, seeing you with Sarah, talking with you over dinner. It is everything I did not know I was missing." "We have only known each other a month," Martha said, but even as she spoke she knew it was a weak argument. She had known Thomas Caldwell for 3 months before she thought she loved him, and that had been a pale, shallow thing compared to what she was feeling now. "Sometimes a month is enough," Grant said. "Sometimes you just know." "And what do you know?" Martha asked, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he must hear it. "I know that I want you to stay," Grant said. "Not just as my housekeeper, but as more. As someone who belongs here, as someone who belongs with me." He paused, then added with devastating honesty, "I am falling in love with you, Martha. I have been since that first day, and I needed you to know that." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning and possibility. Martha felt tears prick her eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of hope, of joy, of the overwhelming relief that came from being seen and valued and wanted. "I am falling in love with you too," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "I have been trying not to. I have been telling myself it was impossible, that I was being foolish. But Grant, when you were gone this week, I missed you so much it hurt. I kept looking for you, listening for your voice. And when I saw you ride in tonight, I felt like I could finally breathe again." Grant's face transformed with wonder and something that looked almost like disbelief. "Truly." "Truly," Martha confirmed. "I love you, Grant Keller. I did not plan to. I certainly did not expect to, but I do." Grant stepped closer, cupping her face gently in his calloused hands. "May I kiss you?" "Yes," Martha breathed. He leaned down slowly, giving her every chance to change her mind, and pressed his lips to hers in a kiss that was tender and reverent and full of promise. It was nothing like the fumbling, pushy kisses Thomas Caldwell had given her. This was sweet and patient and full of genuine feeling. Martha melted into it, her hands coming up to rest on Grant's chest, feeling his heart pounding beneath her palms as fast as her own. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. Grant rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "I want to do this right, Martha. I want to court you properly. I want people to know that you are mine and I am yours and that there is nothing shameful about it. Will you let me?" "Yes," Martha said simply. "Yes to all of it." They stood there together in the lamplight, holding each other close, while Sarah slept peacefully in her cradle nearby. It was not the life Martha had imagined for herself a month ago, standing devastated by the side of the road with her whole world crumbling. But it was so much better than anything she had dared to hope for. Over the following weeks, Grant courted Martha with a sincerity and devotion that made her fall even more deeply in love with him. He brought her wildflowers from the desert, their bright blooms defiant against the harsh landscape. He carved a set of wooden toys for Sarah, spending his evenings painstakingly sanding them smooth so they would be safe for her to mouth. He talked with Martha about his dreams for the ranch, his hopes for the future, and asked her opinion on decisions large and small. They were careful about propriety, conscious of how things might look to the outside world. Grant never came into Martha's room, and she never entered his. They did not embrace or kiss where Carlos and Miguel might see. But in the quiet moments, when it was just the two of them in the evening after dinner, they would sit together on the porch and talk for hours, or simply exist in comfortable silence while the desert stars wheeled overhead. Carlos and Miguel noticed, of course. They were not blind. But they said nothing, just exchanged knowing glances and smiles when Grant and Martha were not looking. They had both seen how Grant had changed since Martha arrived, how he laughed more easily and seemed lighter somehow. They approved, quietly and completely. Sarah Henderson visited regularly, becoming a good friend to Martha. She was delighted by the developing romance between Martha and Grant, saying repeatedly that she had hoped something like this might happen. Her husband, a taciturn man named Robert, was less verbal about his approval but showed it in small ways, bringing over lumber Grant needed for repairs, offering advice on dealing with difficult cattle, inviting them both to dinner at the Henderson Ranch. It was during one such dinner, about 2 months after Grant had returned from Tucson, that the conversation turned to Martha's situation in Casa Grande. "Have you had any contact with your family?" Sarah Henderson asked gently. "I know the parting was difficult, but surely your mother must worry about you." Martha set down her fork carefully. "I have not reached out. I am not sure I would be welcome even if I tried." "Your father is a hard man," Robert Henderson said, speaking up for the first time that evening. "But even hard men can change their minds given time and proper motivation." "What kind of motivation?" Grant asked, his tone carefully neutral. "The kind that comes from seeing their daughter properly settled and cared for," Robert said. "From knowing their grandchild is thriving. From understanding that they were wrong in their judgment." "You think I should go back?" Martha asked, trying to keep the hurt out of her voice. "I think you should consider letting them know you are well," Sarah said kindly. "Not because you owe them anything, Martha. You do not. But because you might find some peace in it, and because Sarah deserves to know her grandparents if they can find it in their hearts to accept her." Martha looked at Grant, who reached under the table to squeeze her hand. "It is your decision," he said. "Whatever you choose, I will support you." The idea churned in Martha's mind over the following days. She was not sure she was ready to face her father's judgment again, to risk the pain of rejection. But at the same time, she thought about her mother, who had wept when Martha left but had not spoken a word in her defense. Was she still crying? Did she wonder if Martha and Sarah were alive or dead? Finally, Martha made a decision. She would write a letter. She would tell them she was safe and well cared for. She would not beg for their acceptance, but she would leave the door open for reconciliation if they were willing to walk through it. She spent an afternoon composing the letter, trying to find the right words. She told them about the ranch, about her work, about how Sarah was growing and thriving. She did not mention Grant by name, but she made it clear that she was under the protection of a good man who treated her with respect. She ended by saying that while she understood their reasons for casting her out, she hoped that one day they might find it in their hearts to meet their granddaughter. Grant took the letter into Casa Grande to post, and then there was nothing to do but wait. The response came 3 weeks later. Grant brought it home from town, his expression unreadable as he handed Martha the envelope addressed in her mother's careful script. Martha's hands shook as she opened it. The letter was short and to the point. Her mother was relieved to know Martha was alive and well. Her father remained unmoved in his stance that Martha had brought shame upon the family and could not be welcomed back. But her mother had saved some of Martha's belongings, and if Martha would like them, she could send them with the next person traveling north from Casa Grande. It was not a reconciliation, but it was not complete rejection either. It was something in between, a tiny crack in the wall that might someday become a door. Martha folded the letter carefully and looked up at Grant, who was watching her with concern. "She is glad I am safe," Martha said. "That is something. It is more than something," Grant said gently. "It is the beginning of healing, maybe, not all wounds close right away. I wish my father—" Martha trailed off, unable to finish the thought. "I know," Grant said, pulling her into his arms. "But you cannot control his choices, Martha. You can only control your own, and you have chosen to be strong and brave and to build a good life for your daughter. That is what matters." Martha buried her face in his shoulder, letting his strength and warmth surround her. "I am so grateful for you," she whispered. "And I am grateful for you," Grant murmured into her hair, "every single day." As summer deepened into fall, the ranch settled into its rhythms. The heat began to ease slightly, though Arizona in autumn was still warmer than most places experienced in high summer. Martha had been living at the ranch for 5 months now, and it felt as natural as breathing. She knew every corner of the house, every quirk of the stove, every sound the desert made at night. Sarah was crawling now, getting into everything with the determined curiosity of a child discovering the world, and Martha was deeply, completely in love. She saw it in the way Grant looked at her, like she was the answer to a question he had been asking his whole life. She felt it in the gentle way he touched Sarah, treating her like his own child though she bore another man's features. She knew it in the way her heart lifted every time he walked into a room, the way she missed him when he was away even for a few hours. One evening in late October, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set, Grant reached over and took Martha's hand. "I have been thinking about something," he said. "What is that?" Martha asked, lacing her fingers through his. "About us. About the future." He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "Martha, I know it has not been very long. I know by conventional standards we should probably wait longer. But I am not a conventional man, and I do not see the point in waiting when I know what I want." Martha's heart began to pound. "What do you want, Grant?" He turned to face her fully, his gray-green eyes intense and sincere. "I want you to be my wife. I want to marry you properly in front of everyone, so the whole world knows that you belong with me and I belong with you. I want to give Sarah my name, to raise her as my daughter. I want to build a family with you, a real family here on this ranch." He paused, then added softly, "I want to spend the rest of my life loving you if you will let me." Tears spilled down Martha's cheeks, but she was smiling through them. "Yes," she said. "Yes, Grant, I will marry you. I want all of those things too." Grant let out a breath that sounded like relief and joy combined, then pulled her into a kiss that was deeper and more passionate than any they had shared before. When they finally broke apart, they were both laughing, giddy with happiness and the promise of the future. "I will need to get you a ring," Grant said, looking slightly dazed, "and we should probably talk to a preacher." Do you want to get married in Casa Grande? Martha thought about the town that had cast her out, the people who had judged her so harshly. No, she said decisively. I do not need their blessing or their presence. Can we get married here, on the ranch, with just the people who actually matter to us? I think that is perfect, Grant said. We can ask Robert and Sarah Henderson to stand with us. Carlos and Miguel would probably be honored to attend. We will make it simple but real. What matters is that we are committing to each other. They spent the next few weeks planning their wedding, such as it was. Sarah Henderson was thrilled to help, providing Martha with a simple but beautiful dress that she had worn to her own wedding 20 years earlier. Robert Henderson agreed to ride to Casa Grande and bring back a traveling preacher who made a circuit through the smaller ranches and was known for being less judgmental than the town reverend. Word of the impending marriage spread through the small community of ranchers and homesteaders that made up the area north of Casa Grande. To Martha's surprise, most people seemed pleased. They knew Grant as a good man, and they had heard through the grapevine how he had taken in a desperate woman and child. The romance that had blossomed was seen by many as fitting and proper, a story of redemption and second chances. A few days before the wedding, Martha received an unexpected visitor. She was in the garden with Sarah, teaching the baby to feel the texture of different vegetables, when she heard a wagon approaching. She looked up to see her mother climbing down from the driver's seat, moving with the hesitant uncertainty of someone who was not sure of their welcome. "Mother," Martha whispered, hardly daring to believe it. Eleanor Norwood was thinner than Martha remembered, her face lined with new wrinkles that spoke of worry and sorrow, but her eyes, when they met Martha's, were filled with tears. "I heard you were getting married," she said. "I had to come, I had to see you." Martha stood frozen for a moment, then walked forward slowly, Sarah balanced on her hip. "You came." "I should have come months ago," Eleanor said, her voice breaking. "I should have stood up to your father, I should have defended you. I have been a coward, Martha, and I am so sorry." "Mother," Martha said, her own tears flowing now. "You came, that is what matters." Eleanor reached out tentatively and touched Sarah's cheek. The baby, curious about this new person, grabbed her grandmother's finger and held on tight. Eleanor let out a sob. "She is beautiful, so beautiful." "What is her name?" Sarah, Martha said. "After Grant's mother, Grant is the man you are marrying." "Yes, he is good, Mother. He is kind and decent, and he loves me. He loves Sarah, too. He wants to give her his name." Eleanor looked at Martha with eyes full of pain and regret. "I am glad. I am so glad you found someone who sees your worth. I wish I had been stronger. I wish I had been able to show you that I saw it too." "You are here now," Martha said. "That takes strength." They talked for hours, sitting on the porch while Sarah played at their feet. Eleanor explained that she had left Marcus Norwood, finally finding the courage to walk away from a man who valued pride more than family. She was staying with her sister in Phoenix, trying to figure out what her life looked like now. She had heard about the wedding through one of the ranch hands who had come through Casa Grande, and she had borrowed a wagon to make the journey. "I know I have no right to ask," Eleanor said hesitantly, "but would you allow me to attend? I would like to see you married. I would like to meet the man who won your heart." "Of course you can attend," Martha said, squeezing her mother's hand. "I would like that very much." When Grant came home that evening, Martha introduced him to her mother. Grant was polite and respectful, though Martha could see the wariness in his eyes. He was protective of her, ready to defend her against any hint of judgment or criticism. But Eleanor Norwood had not come to judge. She had come to offer what she should have offered months ago: love and support. Over dinner, she told Grant how grateful she was that he had given Martha a chance, how happy she was to see her daughter safe and cared for. Grant's wariness gradually eased, and by the end of the evening he was actually smiling at Alina, sharing stories about the ranch and his plans for the future. "You take good care of my daughter," Alina said as she prepared to leave for the hotel in town where she would stay until the wedding. "And my granddaughter, that is all a mother can ask for." "I will," Grant promised. "They are my whole world now." The wedding day arrived with perfect autumn weather, clear skies, mild temperatures, and a gentle breeze that carried the scent of sage across the desert. Martha wore Sarah Henderson's dress, which fit her almost perfectly with just a few minor adjustments. Her hair was pinned up with wildflowers, and she carried a simple bouquet of desert blooms that Grant had gathered for her that morning. The ceremony took place in the yard between the house and the barn, with chairs set up for the small gathering of guests. Carlos and Miguel were there with their best clothes on, looking proud and happy. Robert and Sarah Henderson stood as witnesses. Alina Norwood sat in the front row, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. A few neighboring ranchers had shown up, people who had heard about the wedding and wanted to show their support. And Grant stood at the front, looking more nervous than Martha had ever seen him. His eyes fixed on her as she walked toward him with baby Sarah in her arms. The traveling preacher, an elderly man named Reverend Michaels, smiled warmly as Martha took her place beside Grant. "Dearly beloved," he began, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of Grant Keller and Martha Norwood in holy matrimony. This is a sacred covenant, not to be entered into lightly, but with joy and reverence before God and these witnesses." Martha barely heard the traditional words. She was too focused on Grant's face, on the love and certainty she saw there. This was right. This was real. This was the beginning of the life she was meant to live. "Grant Keller," Reverend Michaels said, "do you take Martha Norwood to be your lawfully wedded wife? Do you promise to love her, honor her, and cherish her in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for as long as you both shall live?" "I do," Grant said, his voice strong and clear. "With everything I am." "Martha Norwood, do you take Grant Keller to be your lawfully wedded husband? Do you promise to love him, honor him, and cherish him in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, for as long as you both shall live?" "I do," Martha said, her voice thick with emotion. "With all my heart." "The rings?" Reverend Michaels prompted. Grant produced 2 simple gold bands that he had purchased in Tucson. He slid one onto Martha's finger, saying, "With this ring I thee wed. Now you bear my name too, Martha. You and Sarah both. You are Kellers now, and you always will be." The words, so close to a promise he had made months ago when he first offered her this new life, made Martha's tears overflow. She slid the other ring onto Grant's finger with shaking hands. "With this ring I thee wed. I am yours, Grant, completely and forever." "By the power vested in me," Reverend Michaels said with a broad smile, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Grant, you may kiss your bride." Grant cupped Martha's face in his hands, mindful of the baby between them, and kissed her with a tenderness that made the small gathering sigh collectively. When they pulled apart, both of them were smiling through tears. "Ladies and gentlemen," Reverend Michaels announced, "I present to you Mr. and Mrs. Grant Keller." The small crowd erupted in applause and cheers. Carlos and Miguel were grinning broadly. Sarah Henderson was openly weeping. Alina Norwood looked proud and relieved in equal measure. And Martha, standing there with her husband's arm around her and her daughter in her arms, felt a completeness she had never experienced before. The celebration that followed was simple but joyful. Sarah Henderson had prepared a feast with Martha's help over the previous days, and everyone ate and drank and told stories as the afternoon faded into evening. Grant and Martha moved through the gathering hand in hand, accepting congratulations and well wishes, basking in the genuine happiness of the people around them. As the sun began to set, Grant pulled Martha aside, leading her away from the crowd to a quiet spot near the corral. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Keller?" Martha tested the name in her mind and found it fit perfectly. "Happy," she said simply. "Happier than I ever thought possible." "Me too," Grant said, wrapping his arms around her from behind and resting his chin on her shoulder. They stood together, watching the sky turn brilliant shades of orange and pink and purple, while little Sarah dozed contentedly in Martha's arms. "This is just the beginning, you know. We have our whole lives ahead of us." "I know," Martha said softly. "And I cannot wait to live every moment of it with you." The party continued as the stars came out, and it was late by the time the last guests departed. Eleanor hugged Martha tightly before leaving, whispering in her ear, "Be happy, my darling girl. You deserve it." "I will, Mother, and so do you." Finally, it was just Grant and Martha and Sarah, standing in the quiet house that was now officially their shared home. Grant took Sarah gently from Martha's tired arms, carrying the sleeping baby to her cradle and tucking her in with practiced care. Then he returned to Martha, who was standing in the middle of the main room, suddenly shy despite everything that had passed between them. "Come here," Grant said softly, holding out his hand. Martha took it, letting him draw her close. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," Grant said. "More than words can say. You have given me everything, Martha. Purpose, joy, a family. I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you." "You already are," Martha assured him. "You have been from the very beginning." He kissed her then, deep and slow and full of promise. And when he scooped her up into his arms and carried her toward their bedroom, the one they would now share as husband and wife, Martha felt nothing but rightness. This was where she belonged. This was home. The months that followed the wedding were some of the happiest of Martha's life. She reveled in being Grant's wife, in having the right to call him her husband, in the simple joy of falling asleep in his arms every night and waking up beside him every morning. He was tender and passionate in equal measure, treating her like she was precious beyond measure. Sarah thrived too, growing from a baby into a toddler with alarming speed. She took her first steps on a sunny December morning, wobbling across the kitchen floor into Grant's waiting arms. He had cried, much to Martha's tender amusement, overcome with pride and love for this little girl, who was not his by blood but was absolutely his in every way that mattered. Carlos and Miguel had been delighted when Miguel's family finally arrived from Mexico in the spring of 1883. Martha helped Miguel's wife, Rosa, adjust to life in Arizona, and the two women became fast friends. Rosa's baby boy, Pedro, and Sarah played together under their mother's watchful eyes, and the ranch felt even more like a community. Eleanor Norwood visited regularly, building a relationship with her daughter and granddaughter that should have existed all along. She never spoke of Marcus Norwood, and Martha did not ask. Some wounds were better left alone to heal in their own time. In the summer of 1883, Martha discovered she was pregnant. She told Grant one evening after dinner, nervous despite the fact that she knew he would be thrilled. She needn't have worried. Grant's face lit up like the sun, and he picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying, like he could not quite believe it. "Our baby." "Sarah is our baby too," Martha reminded him gently. "I know," Grant said, pulling her close. "And I love her with everything I have, but this is different. This is us creating a life together." "It is a miracle, Martha." The pregnancy was easier than Martha's first had been, perhaps because this time she was not alone and afraid. She was surrounded by love and support, with a husband who doted on her and friends who checked on her regularly. When the morning sickness hit, Grant held her hair back and brought her cool water. When her back ached in the later months, he rubbed it gently every evening. When she grew too large to easily do all her household chores, he and Carlos and Miguel pitched in without complaint. Their son was born on a cold January night in 1884, coming into the world with a lusty cry that announced his presence to everyone within earshot. He was perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a shock of dark hair, and his father's gray-green eyes. They named him James, after Grant's stepfather who had been such a positive influence in his life. Grant held his son for the first time with shaking hands and tears streaming down his face. "He is beautiful," he whispered. "Martha, he is so beautiful." "He is ours," Martha said, exhausted but deeply happy. "All ours." Sarah, now nearly 2 years old, was fascinated by her new baby brother. She wanted to help with everything, from changing his diapers to singing him songs when he cried. Grant and Martha watched their children together with hearts full to bursting, marveling at the family they had created from the ashes of Martha's former life. Life on the ranch continued its rhythms. There were good years and hard years, times of plenty and times when they had to tighten their belts and make do. But through it all, Grant and Martha faced everything together, their love deepening with each passing season. 2 years after James was born, they welcomed another child, a daughter they named Eleanor after Martha's mother, who cried when she heard the news. Eleanor was quieter than her siblings, a thoughtful child who loved books and learning. Grant built her a small bookshelf and filled it with every book he could afford, determined that all his children would have the education he had fought so hard to give himself. The ranch prospered under Grant's careful management. He expanded the herd, improved the water systems, built new structures as needed. Carlos and Miguel remained loyal workers and good friends, eventually buying their own small parcels of land nearby with Grant's help and support. The community of ranchers and homesteaders in the area grew tighter, looking out for one another in the way frontier people did. Martha never forgot the woman she had been that hot summer day in 1882, cast out and desperate, walking along a dusty road with nothing but her daughter and her determination to survive. But she was no longer that woman. She was Martha Keller, wife and mother, respected member of her community, a woman who had been given a second chance and had made the most of it. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Grant presented Martha with a gift, a beautifully carved wooden sign that read Keller Ranch ESD. 1877 with a smaller line underneath that said Home of the Keller Family ESD. 1882. "You established this as a home the day you arrived," Grant said as they hung the sign by the front door. "Before you, it was just a place I worked. You made it something more. You made it a home." "We made it together," Martha corrected, linking her arm through his. "Everything we have, we built together." They stood on the porch, watching their children play in the yard. Sarah, now nearly 7, was teaching James and Eleanor a game she had learned from Pedro Vasquez. Their laughter rang out across the desert, pure and joyful and completely unaware of the struggles their parents had faced to give them this life. "You ever think about what might have happened if I had not ridden past you that day?" Grant asked quietly. "Sometimes," Martha admitted. "But I try not to dwell on it. We cannot change the past, and I would not want to. Everything that happened, as painful as it was, led me here, led me to you. I would walk through that fire again if I knew this was where it would bring me." Grant pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You are the strongest person I know, Martha Keller, and the bravest. I am honored every single day that you chose me." "You chose me first," Martha reminded him, "when no one else would. You saw past the shame and the scandal and the fear. You saw me." "I saw you," Grant agreed. "And I loved what I saw. I still do. I always will." As the sun set over the Arizona desert, painting the sky in brilliant colors, Grant and Martha stood together on the porch of the home they had built. They had weathered storms and droughts, both literal and metaphorical. They had faced judgment and overcome obstacles. They had created a family from nothing, built on a foundation of love and respect and unwavering commitment to one another. Martha thought about the preacher in Casa Grande who had cast her out, declaring her unworthy of decent society. She thought about her father, who had chosen pride over family. She thought about Thomas Caldwell, the man who had taken advantage of her trust and left her with nothing. And then she looked at her husband, her children, her home, her life, and she smiled. They had all been wrong about her. They had seen a fallen woman, a source of shame, someone to be shunned and forgotten. But Grant had seen the truth. A woman of courage and determination, someone worth fighting for, someone capable of building a beautiful life from the ruins of the old one. "What are you thinking about?" Grant asked, noticing her smile. "Just that I am grateful," Martha said. "For you, for our children, for this life we have built, for second chances and new beginnings." "I am grateful too," Grant said. "Every single day." Inside the house, baby Alina started to cry, and James called out that he was hungry. Sarah came running up the porch steps, breathless and grinning, asking if she could have a cookie before dinner. The demands of family life pressed in, ordinary and precious and exactly what Martha had always wanted. "Come on, Mrs. Keller," Grant said, offering her his arm with exaggerated formality. "Our family awaits." "Indeed they do, Mr. Keller," Martha said, taking his arm with equal formality. "Indeed they do." They walked into the house together, into the warm chaos of children and cooking and evening routines, into the life they had chosen and built and nurtured with love. The door closed behind them, shutting out the desert night, enclosing the Keller family in their sanctuary of light and warmth and belonging. Outside, the sign Grant had made swung gently in the evening breeze, proclaiming to anyone who passed that this was the Keller Ranch, home of the Keller family. A place where love had conquered judgment, where courage had overcome fear, where a desperate woman and a kind-hearted cowboy had found each other and built something beautiful. Years later, when Sarah was a young woman herself preparing to leave for university back east, she asked her mother about the early days. "Tell me the story again," she said, "about how you and Papa met." Martha, older now but still vibrant, settled into her favorite chair and began the tale. She told it honestly, not shying away from the difficult parts. She spoke of her mistakes and her shame, of being cast out and walking alone in the desert heat. But she also spoke of Grant riding up on his horse, of his offer of work and respect, of the slow, steady growth of love between them. "The world told me I was worthless," Martha said, "that I had no value because I had made a mistake, but your father saw past all of that. He saw me, the real me, and he loved what he saw. He gave me not just a second chance, but a whole new life." "You think you would have survived without him?" Sarah asked. Martha considered this carefully. "I would have done everything in my power to survive for your sake. I would have walked until I found something somewhere, but I do not know if I would have truly lived. Your father did not just save my life, Sarah. He gave me back my humanity. He reminded me that I was more than my worst moment, that I deserved love and happiness and respect. That is a gift beyond price." Sarah was quiet for a moment, then said, "I want to find that someday. Someone who sees me like Papa sees you." "You will," Martha assured her. "And in the meantime, remember that your worth does not come from what other people think of you. It comes from knowing yourself, from being true to your values, from treating others with kindness and compassion. Your father taught me that. I hope we have taught you the same." "You have," Sarah said, hugging her mother tight. You absolutely have. That night, as Martha lay in bed beside Grant, listening to his steady breathing in the darkness, she reflected on the long journey from that desperate day on the road to this moment of peace and contentment. 20 years had passed since Grant had offered her a job and a chance at a new life. 20 years of marriage, of partnership, of building something lasting and good. The ranch had grown and prospered. Their children were healthy and happy and thriving. Carlos and Miguel had become like brothers, their families intertwined with the Kellers in bonds of friendship and mutual respect. Eleanor Norwood had found peace in her later years, surrounded by grandchildren who loved her. Even the community that had once judged Martha so harshly had softened, as people came to know the Keller family and see the good they did. Martha had never received an apology from her father. Marcus Norwood had died 5 years earlier, stubborn and unrepentant to the end. She had not attended his funeral, though she had sent flowers and a brief note of condolence to her brothers, who had stayed in Casa Grande running their father's blacksmith shop. The wound of his rejection had healed over time, leaving a scar but no longer an open ache. What mattered was the family she had built, the life she had created with Grant. They had proven that love could overcome judgment, that second chances were real, that people could change and grow and become better than their circumstances tried to make them. Grant stirred beside her, reaching out in his sleep to pull her closer. Martha went willingly, tucking herself against his familiar warmth. This man, this good and decent man, had changed her entire world. He had looked at a desperate, fallen woman and seen someone worth saving. More than that, he had seen someone worth loving. "I love you," Martha whispered into the darkness, knowing he could not hear but needing to say it anyway. "Love you too," Grant mumbled, surprising her. He was not fully awake, but even in his sleep he responded to her voice. "Always will." Martha smiled, closed her eyes, and let herself drift into peaceful sleep, surrounded by the sounds of home. Grant's breathing, the creaks and sighs of the house settling, the distant call of a coyote in the desert, the gentle whisper of wind through the cottonwood trees. These were the sounds of her life, her real life, the one she had earned through courage and determination, and the incredible fortune of meeting a man who believed she deserved a second chance. The story of Martha Norwood, the woman cast out for bearing a child alone, had ended that day on the dusty road. In its place was the story of Martha Keller, beloved wife and mother, respected member of her community, living proof that judgment and shame could be overcome, that love could heal even the deepest wounds. And when Grant had said those words on their wedding day, "Now you bear my name too," he had given her more than just his surname. He had given her dignity, respect, belonging, and the chance to write a new story entirely. They had written it together, day by day, year by year, building a life that was rich and full and meaningful. As Martha drifted into sleep, her last thought was one of profound gratitude. She had been given a gift beyond measure, a second chance at life, a family that loved her unconditionally, and a future full of promise. Not everyone got that. Not everyone found their Grant Keller, their rescuer and lover and partner in building a beautiful life, but she had. And she would spend every remaining day of her life making sure he knew just how much that meant to her. The Keller Ranch continued to thrive for generations, passing from Grant and Martha to their children, and eventually to their grandchildren. The story of how it all began, of the desperate woman on the road and the cowboy who saw her worth, became family legend, told and retold to each new generation as a reminder that love could conquer judgment, that second chances were real, and that sometimes the greatest blessings came from the most unlikely places. And high on the porch of the ranch house, the sign Grant had made still hung, weathered by years and elements but sturdy and enduring. Keller Ranch, home of the Keller family. A testament to what could be built when courage met compassion, when desperation met kindness, when love overcame the harsh judgments of a world that so often failed to see the truth. This was their legacy. Not just the land or the cattle or the buildings, but the love that had founded it all, the love between a fallen woman and a cowboy with a generous heart, the love that had said clearly and forever, "Now you bear my name too, and together we will build something beautiful." And beautiful it was, beyond anything Martha had dared to dream on that hot summer day when Grant Keller rode into her life and changed everything forever.